Okay, hi everyone, welcome. We have a wonderful session lined up for you with Claire Drummond here. Claire is a senior PMM for Jira and Bitbucket, product marketing manager. Sorry, too many acronyms always. And a fun fact is that in Claire's spare time, she writes historical fiction and poetry and has been known to dabble in stand-up comedy, which I'm still trying to get her to do, so maybe tonight? All right, welcome Claire to the stage.
Thank you. Thanks, Shannon. I probably shouldn't tell anybody about the stand-up comedy thing because the expectations go way higher than I'm willing to deliver. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me. This is a really cool story. I hope that you will find incredibly useful, as it's something that has really inspired me in my personal journey for breaking down silos with teams. So, about 6 months ago, my team and I launched the redesign of a website that we call the Agile Coach, which, if you haven't seen it, go to atlassian.com/agile, and there you'll find all these best practices from people at Atlassian, from our customers, who are sharing their stories about how they can do Agile well at their companies. So this redesign was really important to us because we wanted to include tutorials. How can you take these best practices and work them into your actual tools like Jira? So one of the challenges we faced with regarding the tutorials is that there was a lot of historical content that existed on the website. Atlassian's been around for a long time, and we have documentation all over that talks about these same types of things. But what we were seeing from our customers is that we really needed a single source of truth for how to do certain things like set up your board in Jira or using epics versus stories, which is a question that we get all the time. It was also a complicated project because I had to coordinate with about 7 teams across the globe. And that seems maybe like overkill, but I think it's because we have shared knowledge across all of these different types of teams in the company, and I really wanted to make sure that we were telling a cohesive story that everybody understood and agreed to. So one of the other challenges is that we wanted to make sure that the tutorials were the most up-to-date. And I work in the cloud world where Jira is updating all the time and lots of changes are happening. So we wanted to make sure that these would not only stand the test of time, but we're also going to really tell a great story. So there was also some technical aspects to this project. So in my coordination, I realized that I had to explain what I was doing, the value of my project, my goals of the project, to lots of different teams. So I went on a pretty extensive PR tour to make sure that everybody kind of understood what I was doing. So Atlassian uses a model like this called the Triad model. This is something that will help us coordinate lots of different teams, and it helps you break down very complicated projects. The Triad model came out of Y Combinator, which is a VC firm in San Francisco. And really the idea is that the product managers, the dev leaders, and the design leaders are at the core of the Make Triad and are really pushing the strategy for the product. And then they are really supposed to be the linchpin, the connecting point between the support and ops side and the marketing side. So each triad is agile in its approach, and because we don't really like to dictate how people work, we want to make sure that we empower our teams to self-organize and find the right processes and methodologies that work for them. The triad is meant to help people roll up into the PMs and the dev and the design teams through the Make Triad to make sure that everything is connected. So once we launched the project, we patted ourselves on the back and sat back and watched the numbers come in. And I got this invitation from somebody from the customer support side whom I'd never met. The invite said, "New Jira tutorials." And I thought, oh, this is great. Hopefully she's going to tell me, oh, I have some feedback for you. Maybe she's going to introduce new tutorials that we could include in the tutorials that I had just launched. I thought that maybe she was going to say, hey, let's sync on a regular basis so I can make sure that we include customer support into into your future work. But instead, the conversation went something like this. Hey, I've just written a bunch of brand new tutorials, and I really want your feedback on this. I was talking to some people, and they said that I should connect with you. I melted. She was so enthusiastic. Even worse, her project was already almost finished, and she was asking me for feedback. Her work was done. I had a rush of emotions. How could this happen? I was filled with anger, annoyance. I was a little bitter. Then my empathy kicked in, and I felt so sorry. How could two people supporting the exact same product run the exact same project at the same time and never know about the other person? It was both infuriating and really embarrassing. So I was faced with a choice. Behind door number 1, I could run the situation up the chain. I could shut her project down, making all of her work useless. I could create an enemy in the way, and I could probably piss off the rest of her team members who had worked really hard on this project also. Or I could do something different. I could reach out to her and figure out where communication broke down among our team. I could understand how decisions were being made on her side, and I could incorporate her work into mine to create something that we could both be proud of. Door number 2 was a lot more work. But imagine if she had worked with me all along. How much better our tutorials would have been if her insights were included from the beginning. And I could have provided her with knowledge of all of the technical things that went into my project to ensure that our customers saw the right tutorials. We could have been a dynamic duo if only we had known about each other. So, raise your hand if you have had a similar experience. Now, raise your hand if that experience resolved peacefully. Oh, that's so heartbreaking. All right, well, I'm going to help you today, okay? So there are 3 main reasons why communication breaks down in teams. Today, I'm going to give you some examples of how team communication can break down even if you have an amazing Agile process in place. And then I'm going to give you some tools, some of them you're actually holding in your hands right now, that you can take back to your team, and this will help you identify these communication barriers and really break down silos. At the end of this talk, you're going to be armed with lots of good feels, so be ready. And you're also going to be armed with an arsenal of things that you can actually do tomorrow with your team, no matter what your title is. So the 3 areas that communication breaks down are around lack of trust, no clear ownership, and quite frankly, process fatigue. So let's start with lack of trust. If I had chosen door number 1 in the example that I just gave, I would have made an enemy. And that would not have helped me in the future, and more importantly, it wouldn't have helped our customers. Also, she might have gotten in trouble because maybe her boss would think, well, why didn't you properly vet this project? Or I could have gotten in trouble. Why hadn't I talked to her from the beginning? So at Atlassian, we have a value called open company, no bullshit. And what that really means is you don't go around people above them to try and resolve conflicts. You talk to them, and you try and figure out what happened so that you can fix it for the future. That is really what Agile is all about. It's about iterating and understanding where things are not necessarily working the way that you think that they should. Also, I really want to do great work, and that was not going to help anything. So going above someone's head when you have an issue is something that really erodes trust. But it's also kind of the easiest thing to do. So it's really no surprise that according to a new survey that we ran, there are more than 2,000 US workers, that 78% of people said that they don't trust their teammates. So another example of behavior that erodes trust in teams is something that Atlassian has dubbed seagulling. Feel free to read the definition. So really what seagulling is and why it actually happens at Atlassian is because we are open by default, and we have an internal Confluence instance, and people can really come in to any piece of work, and they can comment on it. Sometimes without context, sometimes they'll cause a little ruckus, drop some comment like, "Oh, did you know this?" And and sometimes it really makes sure the team figure out what's going on. Habits like this chip away at the fundamentals of a strong and cohesive team. This creates an environment where it's uncomfortable to be wrong, to try something new, or to simply misinterpret a data point. So, of that same survey, 59% of people say that communication is their biggest obstacle to success. If people are seagulling on your work, you're obviously not communicating effectively. Also, another obstacle behind this is accountability, which brings me to no clear ownership. Even though we had an Agile framework in place, it still broke down. So how did that happen? Well, in my particular example, it was because we had no clear ownership over that type of content. So I saw a lot of you taking pictures of this beautiful Triad model earlier, and what I'm about to tell you is that this doesn't work. I think it might work for smaller teams, and when Atlassian was smaller, I think it was actually a really good thing for us to do, but we've just basically outgrown it. And obviously, with this example that I just gave, there was a lot of things that broke through or fell through the cracks, and a lot of that is due to things that we can't really control. Like, for example, we were super far apart. She was in Austin, I'm in San Francisco. The PMs are in Sydney, and making sure that we were all on the same page would require a lot of discipline on the team's part to make sure that we weren't having side hall conversations at the water cooler, making decisions. We really would have to be focused on making sure that all those conversations were happening in a shared setting. And perhaps we just didn't know that this was even a thing because our PM was working on other projects. He probably didn't even realize that this could have been an issue. Also, both triads technically had ownership over this type of content. This is guides, tutorials. She was on the ops side. She's the one who's working with customers every single day. I'm on the marketing side. I'm publishing content all the time. It really is, in this Venn diagram, it's really right in the center. And I think that that happens a lot with teams, where there's just a lot of crossover, and there's really no one person that owns it. So finally, the last point of communication breakdown happens when process, like the Triad, fails you. Processes are in place, but then when new things come along and test those processes, you have to figure out a way to identify where it fell through the cracks and move them. So your processes actually are agile. Also, we're human. So I see this a lot. I've been in the Agile community for a few years now, and I hear from talking to customers that they're really relying on the Agile transformation to be the answer to a lot of these problems. Also, we're all working in software, and I think inherently we're obsessed with processes, diagrams, workflows, different systems. It's natural for us to look at Agile frameworks and say, ah, yes, this is the North Star to success. It definitely promises the world. So this is a SAFe diagram. Has anybody seen or know what SAFe is? Oh, good. OK. So SAFe is a scaled Agile framework. And it's a framework that a lot of companies are trying to adopt in order to guide them in their Agile transformation. It's been in the community for a few years now, and we talked to a lot of customers about how they are using SAFe as an answer to their large-scale Agile transformation. And to be honest, this falls apart too, because SAFe really relies on people doing Scrum. And for the most part, our customers are telling us that they're just not doing Scrum. They're doing some kind of variation of Scrum, doing Scrumban, Conplan, lots of different things. And if you're relying on all of your teams to adopt the exact same methodology and then have that scale up, inevitably this is going to fall apart. So I know this is a little controversial, so come talk to me after and we can talk all about SAFe if you want. But I actually have one major problem, not about the framework itself, but something that this makes me feel. SAFe looks like a cloud architecture diagram. A system that tells which computers talk to which other computers in order to do something. But we are not computers. We're humans. Agile has become a way for people to design a system for humans to communicate. We say things like install SAFe, implement it, roll it out, as if we're setting up a server farm. This is something even Ron Jeffries, who is one of the founders of Agile, has talked about. He just published an article called "Developers Should Abandon Agile." When we over-process, our organization starts to look more like this, where everyone has it out for each other. Why is that? Because an agile transformation should not just be about systematically communicating. It should be about effectively communicating. Now imagine this. You start a project with a representative from every part of the team or the organization that is an expert. Each team member has a specific role in the project. It's very clear what they want to do with it. Project updates get shared automatically. Everybody's on the same page. Transparency is baked into everything that you do. Openness doesn't just mean from the top executives, but for everyone. And collaboration doesn't just mean in meetings behind closed doors, but out in the open, where anyone with a great idea can be heard. Sounds amazing, right? So how do we get there? Atlassian saw a need for teams to focus less on processes and more on the practices. So it published a website called the Atlassian Team Playbook, which you should be holding in your hands. These workshops are designed to help teams identify these areas of communication breakdown and practice fixing them. So today, I'm going to talk you through the 3 areas of communication breakdown and 3 plays that you can take back to your team tomorrow and run with them in order to identify some of these areas where you can start to work on that. But first, let's go back to 2001 and remember the Agile Manifesto. The Agile Manifesto is something that was written, I don't know if you know this, but it was written at a coffee break in Snowbird, Utah, by some people who were debating XP over Scrum. And ever since then, it's been ingrained in us as the way to work. But really, the Agile Manifesto is about these 4 principles: individuals and interactions over processes and tools. And if you think about the SAFe framework that I showed you earlier, it seems that maybe we have strayed a little bit from this vision. In Ron Jeffries' article, "Developers Should Abandon Agile," he says, the values and principles of the manifesto for Agile software development still offer the best way I know to build software. And based on my long and varied experience, I'd follow these values and principles no matter what method the larger organization used. So let's dive into the playbook. The Team Health Monitor. The Team Health Monitor are the kits that I just handed out to you when you came in. This is a great tool to help teams build trust. So how do you use the Health Monitor? First of all, you need to pull in together a cross-functional team. In the actual Health Monitor kits, you'll see that we have a different way to run the Health Monitor based off of the different teams that you have. But when do you run it? Do you just add more meetings? So you don't have to add more meetings. You can actually just bake this into your regular meetings as you have it. You could take the first one, you could probably take a full hour, but as you get better at it and you do it over and over, you can take less and less time. So what we've done for my team is we actually bake the Health Monitor into our regular biweekly meetings. We don't run it biweekly, but we run it every quarter. And then it gives us something to refer back to. And again, you want to do this with your functional or your cross-functional team, anybody who's actually getting the work done and starting to see that there are things that are impeding their progress. So basically, in the health monitor, there's 8 different attributes, and it's really simple. You just go through and say, okay, now how does everybody feel about this? And thumbs down, thumbs in the middle, or thumbs up. And the other tip that I would say is have a third party, somebody who's not on the team, run this for you so that they can keep things going and facilitate the conversation. You can also use the kits that we gave you, red, yellow, green. I was actually at an AUG event in DC, and the AUG leaders decided that we were going to do this as a drinking game. And so they accosted me and took me to the bar, and we ran a health monitor, which is a fun way to figure out, to really spark some conversations. So the next play is the other piece of paper that we gave out, which is the DACY framework. I was calling it DACY, but I was corrected. Anyway, so the DACY framework is actually one of my favorites, and something that when I first came to Atlassian, I was just relieved that we were doing it, because I've struggled so much at different companies that I've worked at where we just didn't know who was the actual approver, or if we made a decision, we would come back and say, well, we didn't decide that. What happened? And you'll spin on the decisions that you're making. So DACY stands for Driver, Approver, Contributor, and Informed. So DACY and Team Health, it helps you with decision-making, shared understanding, and a balanced team. But how do you do this? It sounds really great, but we actually have templates to help you do this. These templates are accessible in Confluence Server and Cloud, and you can actually go to the Atlassian Team Playbook website and download PDFs if you don't have that. But one of the things that's really important for this is that you're able to tag different members on the team, which is why Confluence is a brilliant solution for running the DACY. So why you would run it is you want to define the roles in a group for a certain decision. You also want to make sure that you're not overdoing it, because it actually can be a little time-consuming. So make sure that you use it for high stakes or high-impact decisions that come up. And then also, you want to involve everybody that might touch this project. So the example that you're seeing here is when we were trying to figure out which language pickers to use. And you can see that the approver was actually Scott. So it was really important that we made sure that everybody was working on this DACY and pulling in all of the research and pulling in all of the examples of why they might argue for different options. In the framework, you'll see you want to show different options, option 1, 2, 3. You can expand that if you want. But you also want to think through what the different options mean for the team, like what's the rollout plan, and then pros and cons. And then most importantly with this, once you've made the decision, even though it's a living document and you may find out stuff later, you want to make sure that you close it down in a way that you can come back to it and refer to it, so you know for sure that that is why you made a certain decision, because you definitely can forget as things go on. So the last thing that I want to share with you is about retrospectives. Retrospectives are traditionally part of a Scrum process, which is something that happens at the end of each sprint. And people are talking about velocity. They're talking about, did the process work? Were the requirements clear? But what I would actually challenge you to do is to think broader about how you can use retrospectives. Retrospectives are something that you can do for anything. It can be for a big meeting. Say you have a board meeting and you want to think about how did it go. You could run a retrospective after that. You could do it after you have an offsite. You can do it after you've launched a big product. It really scales to any kind of situation where you really want to make sure that that feedback gets incorporated in something else that you're going to do in the future. The other thing that's really important for retrospectives is that you want to include all the people that worked on that thing and make sure that their voices are heard. This is another thing that I would really highly encourage having a third party come in to facilitate. But by third party, I don't mean a consultant. You can just ask a program manager from another team to spend 30 minutes with you to run your retrospectives. There's a lot of different ways. If you look it up on the internet, you can look up lots of different best practices for retrospectives. You can do which was what we did, the I like, I wish, what if. Or you can do start, stop, continue, which is a really popular one. But I wanted to share a story about retrospectives that my team did recently. If you go to hashtag Agile on Retro on Agile, I was like, that wasn't right. Hashtag Retro on Agile, you'll find out that we've actually compiled feedback from customers all over the world, giving us feedback on their Agile processes and methodologies. What's working? What's not working? What would you change? And we were really curious because we're obviously building software that enables teams to collaborate, but Agile is a huge theme in that software. And we want to make sure that we're prepared for what's actually happening in the market. And we have gotten so much feedback, an overwhelming amount of feedback. So some of the tweets that I really like and I wanted to share with you really highlight what I'm talking about today, which is that people want to work smarter and they want to see solutions evolve through collaboration. And then the third one here is that what if we stopped worrying whether our tools, practices, or people are agile or not, and instead kept an open mind about new ideas and help us work better together? So if you check it out on Twitter, it's there. We also have a page that has aggregated all of this feedback. Just Google search Atlassian Retro or Retrospective, and you'll find all of that. And it's really interesting. And you can definitely take this back to your team. So this is what we learned. My team actually ran a retrospective after an offsite. And this is my beautiful team. And we got together and we said, you know, what's really working for us? What's not working? And we did a retrospective on the entire year. And it was really, really interesting because things came up that were very small and nuanced, like maybe some interaction that happened earlier in the year. And then there were also big, big themes. So one of the themes was, it wasn't just me. The Triad wasn't working for lots of different people on the team. And in fact, we discovered lots of different examples where the Triad had kind of failed us. And what we decided was, let's focus more on the squad. Let's make sure that we're bringing in the right people at the right time. Let's make sure that we're not talking in the hall and making big decisions, but we're actually making sure that those conversations are happening over the phone. And because half of my team is in Sydney and the other half is in San Francisco, that discipline is really, really important. And also the time zones are complicated, so what we decided to do was carve out the end of the San Francisco day and the beginning of the Sydney day to make sure that we had that time to talk. We called it squad goals, and we listed, you can see, kill the Triad, rise to the squad. This was a really, really cool learning exercise, I think, for all of us, because we were able to have an open conversation with the team, and we dared ourselves to say, well, maybe this process or this model is just not the right model. So forget those pictures you took earlier, and I want you to take a picture of this instead. I think this is the most important thing for us to take away today. An open culture doesn't come from the top down. It starts with each and every one of you. It starts with the willingness to lead by example, to push your team outside of their comfort zones and into a situation where you can talk about feelings. An open culture is a place where everyone feels heard, valued, and safe. When the 12 guys came together to write the Agile Manifesto, they said this all relies on great communication. So instead of thinking that an Agile transformation is the answer to all of your problems, perhaps it's something much, much simpler. Perhaps it's just about talking. So I challenge each of you to go back to your team, buy everyone some pastries and coffee, and proclaim, today is the day that we open up. Today, we're going to change the way we communicate to each other. We're going to stop thinking so much about process and start thinking more about transparency and culture. You can run that team health monitor and then tell me how it goes. Gracias.
Awesome. We have about 10 minutes for questions, which is a luxury. So any questions? I can run the mic to you. You have one?
Do you have a question?
No?
Oh.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Sajid. Great talk, by the way. Just some thoughts. So when we talk about silos specifically in different geographies, right? So there are silos when it comes to individual teams. There are silos when it comes to individual geographies as well. So I've personally faced that whenever there is, a clash of thoughts, if I may say that, when it comes to people from two different geographies, it's that's the most devastating, because that brings up, even though people are in the same team, same organization, that the time zone differences, it can be anything, or it can be the way they are thinking. It can be a cultural difference for that matter, especially in the initial stages of a project. Do you have any tips how we could minimize the damage?
So the question was, how do we manage silos that are caused by geography or culture, or even different teams, or like marketing and development or something like that? Yeah, so that's the world that I live in right now, is that we have teams from all over the globe, and we're expanding every day. And then also, of course, I work with people from all over the company, and we're always talking about different things, and people are thinking about different problems. So one of the pieces of feedback or advice that I would give you is to actually be more disciplined about your communication. So if you started with the health monitor, make sure that you're bringing in people from all of those different places that are siloed, and make sure that you're identifying where the issues are, so that you can be very laser focused on solving those problems, because you may be surprised at what you find. You may think that it's a cultural thing, but perhaps it's not. Maybe it's something else. And so I think that it's really important to make sure that you're all talking about it in a single space. And then one other thing, I think I mentioned this earlier, that my team identified, was that we were having side chats, and we wanted to make sure that that wasn't happening, and that we were making sure that whatever was discussed or happening at a coffee talk, that it was captured on Confluence, so that we could refer back to it, and that we took the extra time to loop in the other team. That's been a really hard thing to do, because it's really easy to just take somebody out for coffee and then make a decision, but it's really unfair to other team members. So if you're at the keynote and you heard about the example of Trello and remote work, that's one thing that they're very disciplined about, is making sure that conversations are happening on the VC, and that's it. So, yeah.
Hi. So let's say that senior management, the people who are sat maybe in a different country or a different place, different office, are set on the Triad method. How, as somebody lower down in the company, would you present your ideas to them?
So the question is, if senior management is really focused on the Triad model, how does a lower level employee influence change? So that's me. That's literally me. I'm going around the world telling people. No, Atlassian has a great value, which I'm sure you've heard before, which is be the change you seek. And I think that it's not necessarily about coming in and saying this is wrong, or maybe getting a group together behind the scenes and organizing a coup. I wouldn't recommend that. I think that the best way to do it is within your own team to try something else or something new, and then identify what the benefits are from that, and then make sure that you share those benefits with the greater team. And it will be infectious, and it will spread, but change and transformations do not happen overnight. I think we all know that. And I honestly think that there is value in these models, because it helps us see or visualize a place that we're going. So if you want to identify something else or an alternative to what you're seeing, I really recommend that you try it and blog about it. Tell people about the benefits of what else you see that's out there that's working. Pull in examples from other team members. Maybe talk to other teams that are feeling the same issues. I think it's really easy for us to be negative when we see something that we don't like and to say why it doesn't work. But it's a lot harder to talk about the benefits of something else and introduce something else through change on your own team. Any other questions?
Bernie has a special shout out.
Yeah, first of all, well done, Claire. That was brilliant. My name's Bernie. I'm a team coach at Atlassian, and Claire and I have done a lot of work on this. We have a booth upstairs called the Team Playbook booth, where we talk about plays, different ways of working. We go through the health monitors. So, Claire, you're going to come and join us, right?
Yeah, I'll be there.
Awesome.
Come chat.
Everyone else, feel free to come up and join us too. So, thank you.
All right, thank you all. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah.